Welcome to Men Pursuing More, the podcast for men seeking purpose, growth, and fulfillment. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. In this July, we're stepping into a powerful series that honors the courageous men who paid a price in battle, yet refuse to be defined by their wounds. This month, Men Pursuing More proudly features Wounded Combat Veterans Month, a special tribute to warriors who face the horrors of combat and come home with scars, but not without strength. Their bodies may carry the weight of war, but their spirit unshaken. Wounded in combat, unshaken in purpose. These are the men redefining strength, not just for themselves, but for all of us. You'll hear stories of grit, faith, brotherhood, and the relentless pursuit of purpose on the other side of pain. From the battlefields to civilian life, these men continue to fight, to lead, to grow, and to live with impact. Their stories will challenge you, inspire you, and remind you of the strength that lies in never giving up. If you're ready to walk alongside some of the toughest men alive, men who have every reason to quit but choose to rise, then you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join us for this powerful July series. This is Men Pursuing More, and this month, it's about honor. It's about healing. It's about heroes. All right, welcome back to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. Today we have August O'Neill joining us. So August, before we dive into your story, a few sports questions for you. First one is, you have a favorite all-time sports team?
Bulls, anytime that Jordan was playing for them. I grew up my father's son, so I was definitely a Bulls fan through and through. I had about 80 different jerseys. And then funny enough, the Eagles are my football team, even though I've never lived in Philly. I really liked the animal when I was a little kid, and then I just grew up learning more about the team and just falling in love with them.
So we got the Bulls, we got the Eagles, which just won the Super Bowl. How
Sure
about
did,
that?
Yeah.
Go Eagles. I'm not an Eagles fan, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry for you.
And then also, and you talked about kind of maybe your favorite all-time athlete, maybe Michael Jordan or?
Yeah, I'd have to say, as far as sheer effort in the game and a drive, I've watched several documentaries on Michael Jordan, and I was very young while he was playing, but I followed a lot of his career. And yeah, I would say that he's a very admirable human being in general, as let alone being a sports star. He really was a phenom. He was awesome at what he did. He had the game down to a science. He could predict what he was going to do to certain players. That's the level that he played at. He knew what they were going to do, so he could predict how he was going to counter that during the game, and he would call it and make bets with his teammates. And I thought that was amazing that he studied the game so well that he not only knew his part, but knew all of his opponent's parts as they were coming to.
Yeah, isn't that true about MJ? And let's give a shout out to MJ. I know he gets a lot of shout outs. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And then
cliche best,
What's that?
I said he's the cliche best. There's a certain reason for that.
And then one other question. I know we'll get into these Invictus and Warrior games, and get into explaining them, but the hardest event for training for a Warrior game, I think there's a number of different sports involved in that. Which maybe event or sport was the hardest in regards to training for?
To be honest with you, it's the hand cycling piece. So I've cycled my whole life. Most people know how to ride a bicycle and have trained on some sort of bike at some point in time, but it wasn't that long before the Warrior Games that I had been on my first hand cycle. So that's completely cycling using your upper body. And so training for that was real difficult, especially where I was at for both times in the training where I was stationed at was very flat, and I knew we were going to be going up and down hills. So finding bridges that I could cross safely because it's really low to the ground. So I don't want to be hit by a car. But yeah, that was one of the ones that was the most difficult to train for, just because I needed to find the right distances and type of terrain that I could be competitive with it.
I appreciate that. And we'll get into more about the Warrior Games and Invictus Games coming up in your story. Tell us about your experience growing up I believe you grew up in Maine. You moved around quite often with both your parents being in the military, and then eventually believe you attended high school in South Florida. So some of those successes, but also challenges along that journey.
Yeah, with having two parents in the military, and actually technically four parents because my stepfather was in the military as well, and my stepmom at one point in time she was a GS in the military. But I think I gained a lot. My parents were divorced when I was very young. We lived in Puerto Rico while my dad was going to college, and then so that he could commission into the Air Force. My mom was already in the Air Force. He had left enlisted to go to college to become an officer. And so I was really young when they got divorced. Around when I was 4, they were already split. So I was already spending time in more than one location and having to adapt to finding friends and everything like that in those locations. Even though I was young, still going to daycare and stuff. And then when my mom eventually found my stepfather, he had 2 little girls that we just got along really well. My older brother and myself and those two. And we all moved to Maine. And it was just another move that we all had to do together. It was a little easier because I had siblings, so we were all going through it together. But when I go to my father's house, I didn't have that sibling thing down there. So I just had to utilize what I had learned early on in life, and I'm fairly outgoing, but using that charismatic attitude to be able to make friends and adapt to where I was at. I wouldn't change my upbringing for the world. My younger years, school years in Maine and summers in Florida, and then finally getting smart and realizing Maine's a vacation spot. But I junior high, moving down with my father in Florida for the school years and summers in Maine. Yeah, I loved it. I got very culturally different areas and was able to make a lot of lifelong friends and learn things and adapt or build my own personality through that.
And what high school was that at? Once you got to South Florida, I believe you said, talked to you a few weeks ago about, I believe it's in South Florida, right?
Yep.
High school.
That's Charles W. Flanagan High School. It was in Pembroke Pines, Florida. Yeah. My father was stationed down at Southcom in Miami, and we lived up in Pembroke Pines.
And what was that experience like? I believe you were there for your last 3 years of high school?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was a whole lot different than being in Maine. My sister, who is the same age as I am, we're just a few months apart. She graduated in what would have been our class in Maine with a class of 24. I graduated in Miami with a class of 1,700 students. So it was a huge difference. But again, another thing, like culturally very different. In Maine, I was probably the darkest person on our island. And that's not an exaggeration. And in Florida, I blended in. I was just another Puerto Rican guy down there, even though my mom's German, so I'm half German, but I look the Puerto Rican part. So it was a bunch of people that looked just like me, and I wasn't the one that stuck out anymore. In some ways, it made it easier to blend. In some ways, it made it more difficult. So
I appreciate that. So share with the listeners now about your journey since high school, and then eventually your reason for enlisting in the military and some challenges you may have faced at the beginning.
I apologize. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, tell us about the journey since high school and the reason for enlisting in the military, because I know you took on some other jobs. You went to a community college, but what were some of those challenges you may have faced at the beginning, but also just tell us about that journey after high school.
Yeah, I was the type of kid that I was very smart as a child, where I could listen to what somebody said, bring the knowledge in, and I would ace all my tests. I never got below an A on a test, but I was stubborn in the fact that because I would get an A on tests, I just would not do homework because I said, there's no point in it. I have other things to do. I'd work and being with my friends and going to the gym and stuff. So I was very stubborn in that. I was like, I know this stuff. I don't need to do your homework. I didn't realize what an impact it has to your grades. So I almost failed high school because I was being stubborn and refused to do homework, but I just scraped enough together, just enough to graduate. And so because of that, I was going to community college instead of going to a university. And my dad, literally the day after I graduated, was like, all right, let's go sign up for college. Like, you're going regardless if you want to or not. So I wasn't too happy about that, but I was in it. I ended up getting into a real bad car accident about a month or 2 into my first semester. I had fractured my back. I flew out of my car at 70 miles per hour. Yes, I was wearing my seatbelt. It actually came unbuckled.
Wow.
But that goes into a whole faith thing that we can get into at some point in time. But yeah, I ended up fracturing my back, had to opt out of my classes, no longer had a car to get there, and I couldn't walk for a little bit. Not like terribly where there was spinal. It's just the back had to be immobilized for a little bit. And so once I healed from that, my dad was ready for me to go back to school, and I wasn't. I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. And since I grew up in Maine being on boats, I had an uncle that had worked on yachts as a kid. And he was like, maybe Augie could get in touch with these people and he could go work on a yacht. And I ended up doing that. I reached out and I ended up having an interview down there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and got picked up. And so for the next about 2 years, I ended up working on a 186-foot private yacht as a deckhand and traveling the high seas for a while.
And then from there, I believe you had a conversation with your mother. Is that correct? And then
correct. Yeah. Like I said, about 2 years later, I ended up getting off the yacht and I went to go visit my mother for the summer. And she gave me that motherly talk. Hey, I'm her baby boy, so she's real gentle with me. She's like, hey, I know you don't know what you want to do with your life, but maybe just sign up for the military. Your parents all did it. Your brother's doing it now. Maybe just sign up, see what it's 4 years of your life. They'll pay for you to do what you want to do. You'll go see some things and you can go to school later if you want to do that or not. I say, you know what? I could do anything for 4 years. Fine. I'll do that. Yeah. And I ended up going up there. I took the ASVAB. I walked into the recruiter. My scores were very high. And he was like, you could do whatever you want to. He started pushing me to a job called EOD, explosive ordnance disposal. And I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to mess around with bombs. I said, but I'll tell you what I don't want to do. I don't want to sit behind a desk and for as long as possible. He said, we were in pretty good shape. How about these two jobs? He picked out pararescue and combat control, and the medical aspect of pararescue really called out to me. And despite all the other cool things like jumping out of planes and scuba diving, but that particular aspect is really what won me over. And I signed up.
Now, to share with the listeners about that selection process for pararescue, because you probably can't just say, hey, I'm going to do this and sign up and just you become a pararescue.
Definitely not. So just to sign up, now it's for special warfare as a whole, which includes pararescue, combat control, special reconnaissance, and tactical air control party. But back then you could sign up for the individual job that you wanted. And I wanted pararescue, which required you to take what's called a pass test to see if you were even physically fit enough to do the job, the basic form of the job in the first place before you can sign your contract. So that's actually a funny story because I was in Maine that summer. We live on an island. The recruiter's 2 hours away. It came time for the day for me to take that pass test. And I left my sneakers on the house porch. So I drove up there, forgot all about them, get there, and I had to do the run, which is just 1.5 miles for that run. And we drove around, the recruiter and I tried to look for a place to buy shoes. We couldn't find any place. And I said, where am I running on? And it was a high school track, which was a rubberized track. And so I ended up running it in my bare feet that day. And he's like, please don't tell anybody that I let you do this. And now I'm telling people. But yeah, I ran it and I passed the test. So it was all right. I was able to sign up for it. Yeah. And then away I went.
So share with the listeners about what is some of the training that goes along with pararescue.
Oh, definitely. Once you come in, you go to basic training like everybody else. You're usually in what's called a special warfare flight, which is specifically people that are going into those types of jobs, and they get a little bit of extra PT during basic training. That way they can keep, because sometimes people get out of shape because they're not doing enough for those jobs during basic training. So now you get to spend it with your group. And then after that, you go to assessment and selection. Back then it was called indoctrination course or indoc, and that's your selection course. And it is a 10-week course with 2 weeks of that being like a prep course. And then you go through the actual 8 weeks. I apologize. 2 weeks prep course and then 6 weeks of actual team. And then while you're going through that, every week is a different standard as far as physically, which you have to reach. And then once you're through with that indoctrination, you get selected. You'll either get picked up or not. When I went through, if you could make it to the end of that and pass the final eval, you're selected. And now you have to, they don't have the eval standards. What they have is that the selection portion where they take your psychological profile and your physicality and all that kind of stuff, and they select you. After that, it's what's called the pipeline. You go into airborne at Fort Benning. You go to SEER training, survival training up in Spokane. You go to another form of airborne, which is free fall. You can either go to Yuma, or I went down to Otay Lakes down in San Diego for the Navy School. You go through your paramedic course, which is a 6-month long. They take the civilian equivalent, which is 18 months, and turn it into 6 months for us and just smash our brains. And so that's the 6-month course. Then at the end of that, you have to pass the national registry, which is a civilian registry, as well as you got to go to combat dive school. And then you put it all together with PJU as the culminating school at the very end of that. It's the last 6 months. It takes all the training you've done, plus has a mountain phase, a tactics phase, a shooting phase, and basically adds skills to it so that you are using those skills in different arenas as like you would out while you're deployed. And then once you're done with that, you get your beret, you get assigned a team, and you are off and running.
Wow. Someone that goes through that is very qualified to be a pararescue. What you just explained, and you condensed some of that too.
Yeah, altogether, it's supposed to be 18 months. It gets extended throughout because you have to wait till there's a slot open in each school. But yeah, altogether, it ended up being almost 3 years of training for me to get my beret.
Congrats to you and all of you that have been part of the pararescue. So I appreciate you sharing that. So that's amazing. Share with the listeners your eventual deployment to Afghanistan. And I know that tragic event in 2011 and some of the challenges going forward and the many surgeries you had for the next kind of few years.
Yeah, Afghanistan, 2011. I was in Bastion, Sangin Valley, and that was my second deployment. And it was, everybody over there was angry. I say that all the time because that's how it was. And the whole time out there, we were actually running probably about 6 missions a day, just going out either to where firefights were actively happening or to where IEDs had just gone off or to a FOB, a forward operating base, where they had brought people back to. And about halfway through my deployment, went out. It was our third one of the day. Daybreak had literally, because my shift was from 12 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so day had just broken. We had already run a bunch twice that morning. We got re-rolled as we were coming back in. And we went out to troops in contact. It was a team of Marines and ANA, which is the Afghan National Army, who were taking fire. And there were a couple of critically wounded. And as we got over the area, we got the call that now it was 3 instead of just 2 patients that were critically wounded, and they were being stabilized on the ground. When we came over the zone, I made the call as lead medic to give it to the trail bird. We fly with 2. I was on lead and there was a trail. We were supposed to land in the zone. I made the call to give it to trail because I only had myself as the PJ on board with my team leader and my crow. And they had 3 PJ team members on board that could be medics for all the patients. So it was better patient continuity on the trail bird. We became the overwatch bird. As we got over the zone to draw fire, it worked like a charm. They started shooting up at us. We were going back to engaging them, and a round bounced off the door, went down through both of my legs. Then I became the most critical patient. It completely shattered the lower half of my left femur and then went in and out of my right calf. It fractured my tibia and cut the artery in the right leg. I made the call that I was hit, pulled myself back in. I'm being very calm about that right now. Obviously, there was a lot more emotion, I'm going to say, in my voice. I grabbed my tourniquet. My crow jumped on top of me, Derry Porter, and he grabbed my tourniquet out of my hand. He put it on my left leg and then grabbed his own and put it on my right leg. And they sent me back to Bastion. From there, they patched me up as best they could. They reconnected arteries, got as many of the bone fragments that they could, the big ones that could be put back, and they just stuffed it back in my leg and wrapped it up. And then from there, I was moved to Bagram. Not until I made sure that they knew that I was up for reenlistment and I needed my reenlistment paperwork. It's tax-free over there, number one. And number two, I didn't know what was going to happen with me. So I wanted to make sure that my paperwork was squared away. So they sent me to Bagram, did some more stabilization surgeries there, and then on to Landstuhl in Germany. And there's where they did the most of the stabilizing me. All told, from Bastion to Landstuhl, I had 15 units of blood given to me because I had a leak somewhere inside of me that they hadn't found or identified. And I hadn't mentioned it, but my older brother and I both do the same job. He's an officer and I am a enlisted member. So his team actually sent him to see me and get eyes on for the family. So he was actually able to be there with me in launch stool. My paperwork for my reenlistment actually met me in launch stool. So I was able to reenlist with my brother being an officer. He was able to swear me in from my hospital bed. From there, I went to San Antonio Military Medical Center, and the next 3.5 years became a rigmarole of daily torture sessions, or some people call it physical therapy, and surgeries. They call them maintenance surgeries, or surgeries trying to fix my left leg. The right one healed pretty well. And there was always a new idea. I had my LCL, MCL, ACL, and PCL all replaced with cadaver that had multiple things, metal pieces put in, taken out, put in, taken out. None of it worked out. So when I was supposed to have my 20th surgery, which was to have my knee replaced, I went ahead, and as I was going in, the doctor told me what it was going to be. He woke me up halfway through the surgery and he said, "Hey man, it's not going to be what I promised you. I'm going to be able to put this in, and your main problem, which is the pain, is going to go away," because I didn't take pain meds. And that was my biggest issue. Like I come to terms with the fact that I was in my definition of cripple at that point in time, but I couldn't deal with the pain. I don't take pain meds, and because I don't like being foggy. I don't like when people have conversations with me, I don't remember it. So I was in pain 24/7. So he had woken me up, said, "Hey, the pain's going to be gone, but it's not going to be a functional leg. It's only going to bend about 15 degrees. So too much scar tissue." So I said, "Nope, stop the surgery. I'm going to have it amputated." So that's when I made that decision. And I believe that was probably somewhere around May 2014 that I made that decision. And I held off on doing the surgery because I had made the Warrior Games team, and I wasn't going to be able to compete in the Warrior Games that year because one of my biggest events is swimming. And so I held off, went to the Warrior Games, 5 gold medals in swimming. Yes. And then in October of 2014 is when I actually had the amputation.
So share with us the process. Do they have advisors there with you, or were your parents there with you when you were making the decision, or is that just a decision you made all on your own?
It was a decision I made on my own. It was actually a really easy decision. I had already gone into that surgery after going through the previous 19, because that was number 20. And I had already gone in, yeah, this is going to work. The other ones didn't work. Why would this one work for me? And with the decision that if it didn't work, I was going to amputate. I was tired of being a guinea pig. I was tired of being at the Center for Intrepid in San Antonio, where I was watching people that didn't have elected amputations or did have elected amputations, but they were within months up and running on prosthetics, or at least walking without assistance, just their prosthesis. And honestly, I was envious of that, but also I was built up by that. I was inspired by it. Man, I'll be fine if I have to be in a prosthetic. So when he told me it wasn't going to be functional, it was very easy for me to say, you know what, I'm going to amputate. And even through the amputation, I was strong going into it. I was perfectly fine with what was about to happen. It wasn't until I woke up and my father was he was sitting next to me, and I woke up and I looked, and your leg just stops where it's supposed to continue on in the sheets. It just stopped, and I uncontrollably just broke out into tears. And my dad hugged me, and he looks at me and he said, "Stop." He said, "You made this decision. You are going to be fine. Remember what you said before you went into this. You're going to get on a prosthetic and you're going to freaking push forward." Because my thought was, I saw how good prosthetics were now. I was like, man, if I can get up on a prosthetic and running again, I can go back to my job. And once he told me, remember what your goal was, and remember that you made this decision with a clear head, I stopped crying. Like, it took me about 15 minutes and at that whole process, and I stopped crying. And from then on, I haven't shed a tear about my leg being gone. I haven't looked back at the fact that it's not there anymore.
You were made for more clarity, more confidence, more impact. At Maupin Coaching, I help high school and college athletes master the mental game and guide men into purpose-driven leadership. Grab the sports book Rock that merch coming soon, and step into more at moppincoaching.com. Now, share with the listeners like the rehab you go through having a prosthetic leg.
So it's every day, right? At first, they can't give you a prosthetic until your stitches are all healed up. I am a firm believer of your cells have memory, and I had already had so many surgeries on that particular space that I'm pretty sure my cells just knew how to heal appropriately from staples and stitches. Because even the doctor that did the amputation, when he came in at the 3-week mark, which is when I was supposed to get my stitches out, he said, "Man, I did this." He's like, "If I hadn't done this for you," because I had already taken a bunch of the staples out, they were bothering me, they were pulling. If I hadn't done this for you, I would swear you're at least 6 weeks post-surgery. That's how well it was healed. So I had a little bit of a go ahead, like that was good for me. But once I got a prosthesis, they fit you with the initial one just to make sure that your skin can take it and all that kind of stuff. I learned very quickly. And I think the biggest issue people have is trusting the equipment. I come from a job where I have to jump out of planes thousands of feet in the air or hang off of a little piece of prose stuck in a rock hundreds of feet in the air while, by the way, taking care of a patient. So it's very easy for me to trust equipment, especially something that the result of me falling is just going to be from standing to down on the ground. I'll be fine. So I think because I trusted it so well, I was able to progress very quickly on the prosthesis. And by the 6-week mark, usually they don't let you take the prosthesis home, but I was doing so well with it. Like they let me take it home almost like right away. As soon as I had a permanent socket, the carbon fiber one, they let me take it home. And I was not running yet, but I was getting closer every day.
And so is it, like you said, it's ongoing, some of the rehab or training. Do you have to have report back so often, have it checked or have your leg, or like just go through some training with your prosthetic leg? Or
Yeah, not so much with the training myself anymore. I've gotten used to how to fix the compensation that I was doing. I had been for years compensating to the right because my left side was messed up and I was on a cane on that side. So they helped me throughout that process to learn how to not only trust that prosthetic leg, but to move back to my left side and start strengthening the left side core and below so that I could walk appropriately and not look completely off canter or like a penguin, and plus build up the muscles that I need. One thing that I think I did differently than the majority of amputees, a lot of them are just told, hey, expect that your muscle's going to atrophy in that leg, in that limb. And eventually it'll just get so small that it's pretty much skin and bone. And in my head, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I want it to atrophy? Because I don't want bone and skin at the bottom of my prosthetic. That seems like it would hurt. So I am still able to flex my quad and my hamstring. So I have always done sets, flexing, just adding pressure with my hands in the opposite direction, sets with my hamstring. So my socket size hasn't changed in probably 6 years because of the fact that I keep my muscle built up in that leg so that it won't atrophy, and so that I do have that extra padding, which I think allows me to do the things that I have to do because I'm still active duty. So I have to ruck. I have to run. I have to keep up with the younger guys when I'm doing selection stuff. And this leg goes through quite a bit of pounding still. So I'm grateful that I keep it built up.
Well, kind of along with that, share with the listener about the process of returning to the pararescue team. I know there's like an informal and formal process.
Right after my amputation, pretty much that is a definitive point of care, right? There's nothing they can do for that leg anymore because it's gone. So the military, they mark that as a definitive point of care. Okay, there's nothing more we can do for him once he was I'm up on a prosthetics. Early 2015, I went for what's called a medical board. That was to find me fit or unfit for duty. And there's an initial med board, which what that is literally, it's just an objective look. They take all of your records and everything that's happened to you in the hospital and through your career. They send it off to some people, and those people come back with what they think. They're going to find you fit or unfit for duty. If they find you unfit for duty, then it's some sort of retirement, or they have partial retirements where they're like, okay, we're going to retire you right now. And then once you heal up, if they think you can heal, you can come back. or they will permanently retire you. If they find you fit for duty, it's okay. Is he fit or she fit and able to just go back right to the job, or are they fit with an assignment limitation code, meaning they have to be within a certain distance of a hospital, they can't deploy, something like that. So my initial one came back unfit for duty, 40% disability, and permanently retire. And I had already made the decision, like I told you, that I was going back to my job, and I wasn't going to let somebody who never got to meet me or see what I'm capable of make that decision. So I denied those findings, and I asked for a formal board, which is where they actually bring a panel to you. The Air Force Wounded Warrior program, who had helped me out a lot already with getting into sports and stuff like that, they helped me with finding out what I was going to need for this medical board. What they did was they said, hey, look, you're going to need a lawyer. You can have a civilian one or a military lawyer. I opted for the military lawyer. You're going to need to show them that the people in your career field are willing to take that risk by get letters of recommendation. And so I went and did that. I got a bunch of letters of recommendation from high leadership, friends, and throughout. So I had a sprinkle of every level throughout the career field. And then it's like, you're going to have to bring your physical therapist in. So I brought them in. And also you're going to have to show them what you can do. So it was about 8 months, I believe, 6 to 8 months between my normal board findings and my formal board. And so I set out on a mission to find everything that I could do that was pararescue-esque type training that aligned with what we do to prove that I could do it. So I went and signed up for the Baton Death March in the military heavy class, which is a marathon out in White Sands. So I did that. I recorded it. I went through and, enjoyed it. And then I went and did a snow and ice crevasse rescue course up in Alaska, which is actually a course that we do as PJs. So I went up there and did that, recorded it, had a good time doing that, and proved that I could move around with this leg in austere environments while carrying packs and still set up camp and all that kind of stuff, and still ice climb and things. And then I went to San Antonio Military Medical Center, where they have an obstacle course out back. And I literally did every movement that I could think of and recorded it to make sure that they had no reason to say no. I went and did wall climbs and jumps. I did rope climbs. I did patient drags and carries. I did little shoot, move, communicate drills. And I even did the monkey bars because I was like, what if they're like, oh, your leg might fall off if you're hanging. So I did the monkey bars and recorded that. Basically everything that I was like, maybe they'll ask about this. And then I presented that all as evidence for my case. I walked in, went through my formal med board. We all sat down. It was a tiny little room. I really thought it was going to be closer to, I don't know if you've ever seen Men of Honor, but he got a whole courtroom where he got to walk across it in his big dive suit and prove that he could do 12 steps in a dive suit. I was fully expecting to have to throw somebody over my shoulders and carry a patient. There was no room in this room. I didn't get anything like that. It was me, a panel of 3 members. I had my lawyer, my physical therapist, somebody from AFW2 who was the lead of AFW2, and one of my chiefs from my community in the room with us. And they all had to stand because there was literally no room in this thing. But I went through that board. They told me I'd have within 24 hours a result. And then a week later is when I got a call from my lawyer saying, Sergeant O'Neill, congratulations, you've been fully returned to duty.
There it is. Amen.
Yeah, I was supposed to get it 24 hours later. And then it was like a week and a day when she called me. I was actually at work. I was working as a pararescue instructor at that point in time at the schoolhouse, so that I was actually part of the patient squadron, but they let me work over with my guys there on Medina Air Force Base. So yeah, she called me up as I was walking out. I had just gotten done yelling, for lack of better words, at some students. And I picked up the phone. She was super somber about it. And she said, hey, Sergeant O'Neill, I got some news for you. And I was like, I already know where this is going, just because of how she was speaking. And then she said, hey, I just wanted to say congratulations. You've been called. I was like, why would you not start? Like, why don't you sound happy? I was like, yes. I was like, awesome. This is awesome. That was great. And from there, it became not just a reality for myself, because I am the first pararescueman to be returned to duty as an amputee, active or otherwise. But, I think about 6 to 8 months after me, there was another PJ, Jeremy Madama, who had a almost identical injury, gunshot wound, left knee, ended up amputating, that ended up getting returned to duty as a reservist in Alaska. But anyway, so then became the rigmarole of leadership trying to figure out, oh, wow, what do we do? And I think it was a scary thing for them. I don't think outwardly they were expressing that, but they didn't really know what to do. I myself didn't think that I was going to be returned to duty. I wanted to be returned to duty, of course, but there hadn't been that precedent set yet. And I had done everything possible. So I was like, man, I don't know if they're going to do it. And they had gone back and forth for a very long time to figure out what I want. So I stayed an instructor and I PCA'd from the patient squadron on Lackland to the pararescue squadron down there at the schoolhouse. And I was an instructor for a little while. And then I was in the Air Force again. I was doing regular Air Force stuff. So it came time for me to PCS again. I ended up PCSing to the 2-3 out in Herbert Field with the caveat that I was going to be there to get all my currencies done again for pararescue to get fully up again. The 2-3 is a very busy squadron. It's a very operational, busy squadron. So the decision after me being there for a little while was to move me over to STTS, which is a schoolhouse on Herbert Field, where we did all of our selections for the Stowe Crow pipeline, which is the special tactics officers, combat rescue officers. So because that's an actual schoolhouse, so I could jump in on bits of their training to get my own training done. And I'm not taking away a slot from an operational team who needs guys that are already up. And once I was there, I just stayed in the flow there. I went from there to Davis-Monthan, where I became the section chief of special warfare and built all of our training for the special warfare teams going to a combat search and rescue exercise through Red Flag Rescue. And then just recently, I was PCS back to Herbert Field. We stood up a brand new squadron out here where I run what's called the A staff. So basically the military staff at one of the highest levels above the wings or for the wings, building their pre-deployment exercises to go out. I still jump, I still dive, but I haven't yet gone back to a team to go to a real deployment. I've done South America, which is a deployment, but really we went down there to go train their version in Colombia of PJs to do water jumps and stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't a deployment like what I'm expecting from a deployment.
And that's where you're currently at right now in 2025?
Yep. I'm for whatever it is, they just did the title as the Deputy Exercise Director. It feels fancy, so I'll wear it.
All right. Now share with the listeners about this pineapple story and the ongoing communication you have on WhatsApp with.
Yeah. Everybody, if you don't, you should have a close group of people that you can reach out to for whatever the reason is. Throughout our healing, what is now the Pineapples had touch points. We were training together to be in the Warrior Games. We were training for different events. Like we had different TDYs together where we would go and be resiliency speakers. The Pineapple actually came from a night in Hawaii. We were having a good time. It was actually our final night. We were there for the PACAF games where we were all competing. And so it was our final night there. There was a pineapple there for our centerpiece. And I looked at it and said, man, I wonder if you can eat through a pineapple like an apple. And everyone was like, no, you can't. It's bark. And so I just picked it up and took a giant bite of it. And it was easier than I thought it was going to be. And I chewed it up. It doesn't taste great, but it's easy to chew. And then I passed it on. And then the goal between our group, who had solidified during that week that we were a very close group of people, we started taking bites out of it. We made the whole way around. That was the original goal. And then it became eat the whole damn pineapple. So we ate the pineapple and that just became us. It was just a weird culminating event that like really truly bonded us. And ever since that, like we had started a WhatsApp group with just a couple of us and we would talk every single day. And then there was we did the Air Force trials in Las Vegas and I went to go see my tattoo artist because that's where my first team was. So my tattoo artist was out there. I needed to get some things cleaned up. And one of the Pineapples, Sarah Evans, she was like, hey, I'll go with you. And then that night, the thought of the pineapple tattoo was born. I was like, we should get a pineapple tattoo. And I don't know. I promised my husband I wouldn't get another tattoo until he got it. But then Sarah's got a little devilish side to her. So she's like, all right, let's do it. And so her and I got them on our rib cages. And then we went and showed Gideon and Leonard and I believe Mitch and said, hey, look what we did. They were out at a club or a little bar. And they're like, what? You guys just did that? We want to do it. And so yeah, it became a thing. We all have the same pineapple tattoo. We passed the actual stencil around. So it's the exact same one on each one of us. It's a perfectly imperfect pineapple. And it's just one of those things in life that like you cherish, because I know at any point in time I can reach out to literally any one of them. We all have people in every group that we're in that we're like, I talk to that person less. But it doesn't matter with this group. Yeah, we might speak to each other less some places and more in some places, but like I could reach out to any of them, and I know for a fact they would be there for me. And it's been a very motivating thing because, like I said, we all compete. We're all injured, wounded, ill, or injured. So we've all had struggles, and we all see each other's struggles, and like it drives us to be better. It's a group of people that I never would have thought would be in my life. Being a PJ, we don't really have a lot of communication with what we call like the proper side of the base, because we have all of our support personnel at our unit. So we don't go to finance. We don't go to the med group if we have to, but we have docs in our unit. We have finance personnel in this group. We've got medical personnel. We've got intel. We've got all these people that never would have spoken to each other on this type of level, besides to get whatever job they needed done from each other. And we've all just come together as like amazing friends, and we've all bonded, and like we just get along very well. We understand each other well. We listen to each other well. All of our eccentricities are accepted between each other. It's really a humbling thing to have in a group of people.
Almost like you're like a family.
Yeah,
what would it be like? Because you're there to support each other, but you're even more than just support. But
yeah, definitely. When Mitch was going through his skin cancer thing and he was in the hospital, like as many of us that could, he was unsure what was happening. We weren't waiting for results. We didn't really care. We were like, he needs us. So we flew out there, and we're in the hospital with him just to hang out, like just so he could see a friendly face. And that's just the kind of the people we are. It is a family. It's a family. It's the family you choose, not the family that you were given.
And I meant to put my cell phone like down, the screen face down, and guess whose name just came up? Get a message from Mitch.
Oh, that's funny. Because
I'm looking go. He's listening in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, going forward, share with the listeners. I know we touched on this before, but about participating in the Warrior Games and as well as Invictus Games.
Oh man, there's nothing like it. If you've played sports in your life, the build up to an event, to a major game, to a major sporting event, the Warrior Games, I thought that would probably be the peak of my arena style competing, which is awesome. The Warrior Games are great. It's for all of the U.S. wounded, ill, or injured members from each different branch. And inherently in every branch, there's always some sort of battle between them. We always give each other crap across the branches. So this is a place where that gets taken to another level, because not only can oh yeah, Army, okay, Navy, blah, 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 all right, Air Force, but also now we're competing against each other. And so you have a bunch of people who have fought and served and truly proven themselves as patriots across the branches, getting chosen to come and compete against each other, where they probably, a lot of them never thought that they would be able to do a lot of things that are in theirs, because it's like a mini Olympics. Like they have track and field, they've got cycling, we have seated volleyball, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball, swimming, shot put, discus. So there's all kinds of events that people never probably would have done before or never thought that they would do again. And like they're out there crushing it. So that's just another buildup of awesome vibes for your internal soul, just to be able to see that and push yourself harder. And then you have the Invictus Games, which is the Warrior Games on steroids, because then they take the top athletes from the Warrior Games and they put those together on one team US, so that you can compete against other countries and their wounded, ill, and injured warriors, which is even more awesome, because when you deploy, like you're not just deploying with US members. Like I deployed and I was there with the Afghans. I was there with freaking the British. I was there with Scottish, Danish, like all kinds of other countries were there with me fighting these fights. And so going to the Invictus Games and getting to see those other forces together again, competing with each other now in friendly sport, it was awesome. And the Invictus Games it's on another scale. Like they have huge sponsors. It's crazy, like the things that they're able to do to put it together. Like there's a whole, it really is the Olympics for wounded, ill, and injured warriors. And it's an experience that if I could do it again, you can only compete in 2 Invictus Games ever. It's just to give everybody a chance, and probably not to try not to stack the teams with warriors all the time. But also, if I could ever do it again, I would in a heartbeat. That's it. It was an experience. I remember I've done 2 Invictus Games. I did the 2016 one with Mitch, actually, and Sarah and our buddy Gideon. Especially, there was a bunch of pineapples in the 2016 games. And then I did the 2022 games in the Netherlands. And it was just, both of them were amazing experiences. And if you want to have a reason to have permanent resilience, nobody's happy every day, 24/7. But just to experience and be a part of something like that is big enough to give you a drive, myself personally at least, a drive to be like, man, all these people that I saw from all walks of life, from like every background, are able to go in there and just give their all for something that they believe in. So why can't I just push a little harder today than I did yesterday? Why can't I go out and I'm slumming in my job right now. I don't really like what's going on, but why can't I put more effort into the products that I'm building, because it's for the future of the training for our people. So it provided a good why to continue on days that I'm not really feeling life, not in a too much of a negative way. I'm just being like, everybody gets depressed every once in a while. But
in the Invictus Games, is there a winning country?
Yes. Yeah. So they do it just like the Olympics. You have a medal count,
nice,
overall medal count, and who gets the most gold, who gets the most silver, who combined has an overall the most medals. I will say that Team US usually wins because we are awesome. But yeah, it's really awesome how they put it all together.
And I remember you mentioned earlier in the podcast about 5 gold medals. Was that in the Invictus Games or was that in?
So that was the Warrior Games that I got 5 gold medals at my first Invictus Games. I've got a gold medal in, I think I got 2 silver and a gold, but not in swimming. Those 5 were all from swimming from the Warrior Games. I didn't get any in swimming because the very first one I jumped in, the warm-up pool was cold. I didn't go warm up. I jumped in and did something to my shoulder my very first heat, and I was out of swimming for the rest of the Invictus on that first one. But I did end up competing in a couple other things, and we got, I believe, silver. It was in seated volleyball. But the second Invictus, I did 5 heats, and I got 2 gold, 2 silver, and a bronze in all of those. So I medaled in every heat that I swam.
And that was a swimming, right? Okay, yeah. This is swimming in 2022.
Yes.
All right, go USA.
Yeah. Go Team US. That's what's up.
What is maybe some of the best advice you'd ever been given to, and why do you feel it was the best advice, and who gave it to you? I know your mother gave you some advice about the military. Was there anyone else along the way that maybe currently in the last maybe 5-10 years?
I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of, everybody has like little nuggets that they get from a lot of people. Not to toot a horn, the best advice that I have honestly comes from me, only because I came from a career field that's full of bravado. We go through a lot of training to get where we're at, and you're told you're the best, you're above, you're special, which to a degree, I agree. Like, not everybody can call themselves special. There's a reason why we're special forces, because we went through the training we did. However, when I first got injured, I went to a training camp for Air Force Wounded Warrior, and I was very upset to look around and see a lot of people that had 2 legs that were running around with what I could see physically was nothing wrong with them. And they were wounded warriors. And my idea of what a wounded warrior was not fitting with what I was seeing. And so I excluded myself. And I would just sit out. Like, when it came to the games, I would compete and do what I had to do to make sure my team wins. I'm not that type of person to be like, oh, you guys do it without me. No, I'm going to compete to the best of my ability. But long story short, I would sit out to the side. I started listening in, because inherently we are social creatures. So I started like getting closer and listening into these conversations. And I realized that all of these members were going through the exact same things that I was going through. disconnect with their families, their friends. They didn't have any ability to tell people and talk to people about certain things. Depression with drugs from the painkillers and stuff like that. Inability to talk to anybody about what they truly felt and wanted. And I was like, man, doesn't matter what I think is happening to them. These guys obviously went through something. And that's when I came up with my little life mantra, which is, it doesn't matter where you came from. Like, you're only responsible for the level of life that you have lived. If the worst thing that has ever happened to you is a car accident, it was just a fender bender, but that's the most violent thing that you've ever experienced, you're going to be affected the same as somebody who was blown up in a Humvee mentally, because that's the most violent thing that they've ever done. You're going to go through the same types of struggles. And so that was very humbling for me. So now I take everybody at face value. I'm like, hey, what do you have to present to me? I'm going to listen with an open heart, open mind. And I try to gain knowledge and growth through everybody that I meet for that purpose, because I know everybody has something to offer without my initial judgments being put on them. Yeah. So that's really how I try to move forward. I don't try to stay in the negative for a very long period of time. I know there's always something better coming along.
I appreciate that. That's powerful for you sharing that with the listeners. What about, before we wrap this up, about like a shout out to some people maybe we haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to give some praise to or recognition to people that really impacted you?
Oh, I
know there's been probably many, but
yeah. First off, I don't know what everybody's faith is. God is huge with me. My family, we go to church. I was raised in a Christian home. Not to say that we're overly, but I know I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the fact that I've been gifted. My mom prays over me all the time, and I've been gifted with his glory, and whether or not I think I deserve it. Also, I'd like to shout out to all of the pineapples. They are a lot of the times the sole reason why I was able to push for a very long period of time. And I will always be indebted to them for that. My family, my wife, Chelsea, I'm a pain in her butt. I know it, but she takes care of our family nonstop, whether she's mad or not. And my daughter, for being my exact personality. I get to see myself reflected in her and her goofy personality all the time. So it's awesome. And then top, everybody does their parents. I will say my older brother. I think sometimes our roles flip. I'm sometimes the older brother when it comes to certain advice, and he's sometimes the older brother when it comes to certain advice. But he's always been a steadfast motivation in my life. And whether or not he thinks so sometimes, he's always somebody that I strive to emulate.
So what are a few final thoughts that you want to leave with men? And this might be like veterans or just any of the listeners on this podcast as they continue their journey.
First and foremost, everybody struggles. You're not alone. Everybody struggles. Everybody has their days. I know I mentioned it. Don't be afraid to reach out, talk to somebody about anything, even if it's not on a day that you're depressed about something. Don't be afraid to reach out. Talk to people when you even think that you're thinking about feeling sad. You're like, oh, I don't think I'm going to have a good day today. All right, go call somebody. Go call your friend, and you will see just the joy. People say that anger is addictive. Like, people can pass that on, and so is joy. If you smile at somebody and they smile back at you, it's as easy as that. It's just as easy to pass a smile as it is a frown. And I think that's my biggest one. You lose a lot of people, you lose a lot of friends because of what they're going through. And the common thing is usually they think they're doing somebody a favor. They're not. You're not doing anybody a favor. We would much rather you hear. We'd much rather talk to you. And if it's someone like me, like I probably am relying on you for a day that I'm struggling. And that's my biggest one.
All right, August, thank you so much for your willingness to share. And where can listeners find you and follow your story?
Oh, man, I used to be big into social media, but if you go to Instagram, and there is a Instagram called Grog N, the letter N, Angels, and you'll find it. And it's a podcast to come with a buddy of mine. Just we're trying to build it to share military stories. We haven't set in an actual episode yet, but that's where I will be building in the future here. Otherwise, you could Google me. My stories are all over the place right now, whether I want them to be out there or not. They are there. And if anybody ever needs me, like, I'm always a reach away. Like, people know how to get in contact with me, and I don't turn people away to have a conversation.
All right, that's a wrap with August O'Neill. So I want to thank you for being a part of Men Pursuing More podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening to Men Pursuing More podcast. Don't forget to follow us at moffencoaching.com.